Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show here in As the Hills Burn. I'm joined here by an absolute shaman musician, studio legend, and a guy who's been all around this world, Budimir. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. How are you, brother?
I'm breathing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I want you to talk to the audience about the first time you met Eric Dolphy.
The first time I met Eric Dolphy was with a band that was going to work what we would call a black nightclub, and I'm trying to think of the name
Memory
of it.
Lane.
No, it wasn't Memory Lane. It'll come to me. And H.B. Barnum was directing the band, and it was about 5 pieces, and Eric was one of the players, and we worked there, and I didn't see too much of him after that, but then, I don't know, a few years after that, we both got called to work for Chico Hamilton, and we actually were roomies to save money. We shared the same room in New York. Well, and everywhere we went, New York was one of our main places. And it was a joy to hang out with him and pick his brain from time to time.
What did you learn most? I mean, you played with Hamp Hawes before, too?
Yeah.
I mean,
I only think I played with him maybe one time.
What did you learn from those guys? I mean, Dolphy gets lost in the mix because we lost him so early, but he was in the same class as Coltrane and Mingus and those guys. What did you learn most from those?
Well, I don't know if learning is the correct word.
Look up at the people want to see your face. So
yeah, I was exposed to his concept. I was exposed to Hampton Hawes' concept. Anybody I worked with, if I liked how they sounded, I just would put that in my musical vocabulary. One other guy I'd like to mention, did you ever hear of Anthony Ortega?
Yeah, monster horn player. Bill Goodwin talks about him.
His nom de plume was Batman, and he was incredible. He really, to a lot of us here, and we got him a lot of gigs, or a fair amount of gigs, for a player of his ilk. I remember, I think we got him a gig with the film composer Bill Conti. So it was pretty something.
You know, let me ask you, you talk about, people say, who are your favorite guitar players? And you say Bud Powell, and who's the other one?
And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but I listened, well, my main, the god for me and everybody else was Charlie Parker. And I wanted to play like a wind instrument instead of a percussive instrument, which the guitar is. And so therefore I would listen to a lot of trumpet players or saxophone players. But Bud Powell, to me, I say Bird and Bud are my 2 favorite guitar players. Can I tell you one funny little
please,
vignette
please.
about Bud?
Go ahead.
I was working in Birdland with Chico.
Yeah, let's turn over this way here.
Okay, and Julie, take this guitar.
Yeah.
Would you?
That's better.
Got to be careful.
Lovely wife there.
Thank you.
And
You're playing Birdland with.
Well, I was with Chico, but I want to tell you another story about that. Bud was working there, and on our off night, we would come in and hear him. And I'm one of the few people that I can say Bud Powell borrowed some money off of me. He was playing, and all of a sudden, he was a little squirrely, I think, in the head. And I was sitting in the back, and he said, man, I need some bread. So I quick rummaged in my pocket. I think I gave him $5 or something. A half an hour later, he came back and got on the stand and continued playing. But I idolized him. And the other thing I wanted to mention, when Chico was at Birdland, listen to the opposite group. Miles, Train, Cannonball, Wynton Kelly, and Paul Chambers. Probably the best band ever, with the exception of the former Miles group, which had Red Garland in the group and Philly Joe. So I guess I would have to say maybe they had an edge, but it was just a thrill to get off the stand after those guys played.
Can you talk about how you wanted the guitar to be or feel like a wind instrument, even though it's a percussive? How did you make that happen?
Well, I remember there was a man, I think his name was Frank Vivino. I know he has a son. I don't know if I have the first name.
Jimmy
right.
Vivino, I think.
He told me, when you play, try to breathe. And it wasn't just him, but for some reason early on, I wanted to be very lyrical and breathing. And I think my CD that maybe we can talk about a little bit later bears that out. I didn't want to play like a quote unquote guitar player.
The Cannon Miles Train band, why was that considered in your mind the greatest? I hate the word jazz, but the greatest. Why was it in your mind the greatest?
I guess an easy answer is because they just were. There was so much music and so incredible. Oh, I just was unbelievable. I don't know how else to put it. They were just. Well, Miles is one of the kings of all time. Train of all time. Cannonball. I mean, they're all in the stratosphere, man.
But at that time, they weren't leaders yet. Cannon wasn't a leader yet. It was Miles's band.
I guess he became a leader after he left Miles, right?
Right. And I'm just trying to get the idea, like in the live setting, was it just that it was just endless amounts of ideas, of melodies? I mean, I cannot...
Everything, the time feeling, the sophistication, the harmony situation, everything. You just, I don't know how else to put it.
Well, you're doing a great job. We're talking to an absolute shaman musician, Dennis Budimir. You told a great story to me on our first radio interview about the first time that you went across the country with Chico, and actually there were certain places in the country that he said, Dennis, you got to run. You're like, Chico, I'm starving, man. I need an Italian sub or something, dude. and he's like, no, we can't stop in this town.
Or what they would do, they would send me and the little young white boy. And
the little young white boy into the deli, right?
Right. And I remember, Chico, I'm really getting tired. I mean, are we almost there? He says, well, we got about 1,500 miles to go. And what we would do, we would take 2 cars. I think at that time he had a Chrysler Imperial. 5 guys would be riding there, 3 in the back, 2 in front. And his brother would be in a van with the instruments. And it was unbelievable.
Forrest Hamilton.
Huh?
Forrest was his brother.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if it might have been. I think this brother was Tommy. I think.
Right. So he had the instruments, and the whole band was in the car.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit? I mean, were you playing gigs along the way? I mean, were you part?
No. We drove nonstop from L.A. Well, I remember. I think the first time we went back, we went to Philadelphia, and from L.A. to Philly nonstop, 24 hours a day. It's unbelievable, man.
And there were certain towns that I remember talking to Mike Knock, the piano player, and he was with Yusef Lateef, and they stopped in some town in Colorado because the car broke down. Johnny Coles, the trumpet player, he had like a skin pigmentation. Knock was a freak. Yusef, they were a lot of black musicians, and they couldn't get the part from San Francisco for at least a couple of days, and things started to get a little bit weird. And Yusef said, let's get out of here. So they drove that, and they were run out of there by townies. Yeah. Did you have similar experiences with people?
We never, from my memory, I don't think we ever broke down. But another sad thing, when we went, I don't remember why, but we had a gig in Miami. And the band had to split up because of the race situation.
Segregation.
Huh?
Segregation.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So they were driven to the black part of town. They had to stay in a hotel or a family over there, and you guys got to stay in a hotel.
That's right.
You know, I wanted you to talk about, this is an interesting question. A lot of cats today very focused on chops and facility. But were you more concerned about the sound that was coming out of your apparatus before technique? Were you more concerned about that it was a sound that you liked that was coming out before you focused on chops? Can you take us through the evolution? Because it's kind of, one should come before the other. You should like what's coming out, the sound that's coming out before you really work on your chops. I wanted to get how you took your how you work.
I think I commingled them. Everything like that was important to sound. I really there was a certain guitar that was made around, I think it was 1938, a Gibson Charlie Christian guitar, and they call it a Charlie Christian because Charlie Christian, who played with Benny Goodman, used this guitar with a certain pickup, and the pickup became known as the Charlie Christian pickup. And to this day, I still use it on my electric guitar for jazz, and it just had that incredible sound. But as far as the other elements, lyrical and playing like a wind instrument, I was doing it simultaneously.
What was your big break into the studio scene here? I mean, you are one of the original members of the Wrecking Crew.
Right.
And I'm just trying to figure out at that time, you know, I guess when Blaine came up here, Earl Palmer was really all over the place as the drummer. But when you came in here, who gave you your break into the studio?
Well, Tommy Tedesco was my main mentor and supporter, and he was just incredible. He really helped me a lot.
Can you give an example?
Can
you give an example?
An example
of how of his general?
Well, he would recommend me, and word of mouth, and then I would start to work with one leader, then another. Bob Bain helped me, who passed away recently, unfortunately. By the way, as an aside, we did a video with me and Bob Bain, who recently passed away, and Bill Frisell. And if you want a little aside again, I have a Bill Frisell story.
Yeah, please. I love Frisell.
Okay. Bill did an album, but this was before he did it. He was doing an album of tunes from motion pictures, and he wanted to meet some of the guys that did the original scores on the movies, some of the old guys, and I'm one of the old guys. So he rented a hotel in the valley, and we went out there, and Julie and I happened to be the first people there. Now, Bill Frisell is a big star. I don't consider myself a big jazz star. People know about me all over the world, but Bill Frisell is a big star. He comes out with an old LP of mine and just stuck his hand and said, "Dennis, I've been a fan of yours for years and years and years, and it's great to meet you. Would you sign?" I mean, he reversed what I thought was going to happen. I was going to adulate with him, and he did just the opposite, but he was a wonderful guy, a very sweet man, and so we had a great relationship. And then we did this video that was sponsored by a Fretboard Journal, a magazine, but I think anybody that goes on YouTube and types in Bill Frisell, Bob Bain, and Dennis Budimir, it'll come up. And what it is 2 hours of playing and great musical stories. So I think the people would be interested to watch that.
It's interesting. I'd like for you to talk because Paul Bley and Steve Swallow and Jimmy Giuffre had this trio in the early 60s, and it was very free, and there was no trap set. And you and Peacock were doing very similar stuff at that time. The early 60s, I mean, going back to that time, it was considered cool jazz at that point, but the Giuffre stuff was much more free. What was the most free setting that Budimir ever... I'm not talking about the studios, Barbra Streisand, train wreck sessions with Kellaway or, Harry Nielsen sessions where I'm talking about free jazz. What were you and Peacock? Was that the most free jazz you ever played?
Well, I don't know if I would use the term free, but one of the great jazz jobs I ever had in my life was with Bud Shank, the late Bud Shank.
Legend.
And it was Bud, me, Gary, Peacock, and Chuck Flores was the drummer, and I think there was one other drummer. But when I met Gary Peacock, I said, holy shit. I mean, it was so unbelievable. What would happen, we worked at a little club that's now gone called the Drift Inn in Malibu, and some tunes would last 45 minutes. Bud would play the tune and play his solo, and he would get off the stand, and it would be basically me, Gary, and the drummer. And man, the two of us were doing, it was, I don't know if you use the term free, but it was pretty incredible.
How did you work? Was it would you lose track of tick-tock time? Like, would you not even realize you had been playing for 45 minutes?
I don't think anybody cared, and Bud didn't care, and the management never complained. So,
but I guess here's the thing: talk to younger cats out there about playing for that long, because Kenny Barron would talk to me about going to Philadelphia when he was first really touched his heart the first time he saw Elvin and Coltrane go at it in a duo. McCoy and Jimmy Garrison left the stage. And they went at it for 40 minutes. Well, that's fine. The time is one thing, but it's never repeating any ideas. And I don't think you guys were repeating any ideas.
I don't think so.
How did you learn to be original for that long?
I was born with it. I really do. I had a gift. And
what was that? Flesh the gift out for the non-musician out there. What's the Budimir gift?
Genetics. I don't know. I had it at a very early age.
But you are somebody that you fit into, vocal, you could back vocal sessions, you back vocalists live, you could play, in big band settings. But that stuff with Peacock was, there are no tapes of that circulating, are there? This Malibu Inn that you talk about?
The Drift Inn in Malibu.
The Drift Inn.
Yeah.
Shank would leave the stage and you would go for 45 minutes with Peacock. Remarkable stuff. Essentially, can you talk, keep the comments coming in, people are having a ball, but your discography is so long, but this one album you made a couple years ago was a leader. Can you talk about the conception of that album?
What was that?
It's the one that with the dozen copies of, all the copies up there.
Oh, you mean my CD?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very proud of it. What it is, I'm playing gut string. Well, let me just say how this started. I picked a tune called Chega de Saudade, a very famous bossa nova tune. I played it on electric, and I have a recorder in the music room in there. And it came off great, and I said, you know what? It's a bossa. Let me play on a gut string on classic guitar. So I redid it again, and I said, you know what? I got the concept of the album. I wanted to pick the most beautiful tunes ever from all genres. I wanted to be as lyrical as possible. And so what I did was, I have a synth set up there. I couldn't afford an orchestra. I wanted Johnny Mandel to the orchestration because I think he's God. He is absolutely... He
is. I love Johnny.
Number one guy. Anyway, so harmonically I tried to emulate him, and what I would do, I would lay down Fender Rhodes as my basic instrument, then I would lay down bass, then drums, then strings, and then brass, all by myself, and then I would play on top of it. And the music, the tunes are so beautiful. I actually was teary-eyed half of the time I was playing it, and I'm very proud of it, and I hope people that don't have it maybe will afford the chance to get it. It's called The Soul of Dennis Budimir, available on CD Baby and Amazon. And my peers, who I wanted their idea and comments, even if they had some negative comments, And I remember one in particular, I sent it to a lot of folks that I respected. Benny Golson, who we all know, one of the tunes on
Killer
there
Joe.
is I Remember Clifford. And I went over to Benny's house in L.A. because I used to work for him when he wrote for TV shows. I said, Benny, I'd like you to hear my new album. I'd be interested in your comments. Went over, and after we finished, he said, there's been over 400 versions of I Remember Clifford, and yours touched me more than any. Man, I was on heaven, on cloud nine. And then I tried to get it to Quincy Jones, who I used to work for years ago, and guys would say, you can't get a hold of him, man. He's the biggest music mogul in the world. And I finally found out where he lived. I was going to ring the doorbell, and I didn't want. So I got the address, and I mailed it. Never heard from him. 6 months later, I get a phone call, and it's Quincy on the phone.
Wow.
He's at LAX with Steven Spielberg, and he said, Dennis, you've been a bad expletive for many, many years, and I just wanted to say I heard your album, and it's fantastic. So things like that. Johnny Williams sent it to a lot. Oh, I even sent it to Johnny Mandel, and he said, man, you know, I just got great. So I'm very. It's like my legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the street cred from your peers. I mean, they loved it.
Right.
Obviously, you know, then that's huge. There was a picture over there with you and a grinning Emil Richards, and it was a Frank Zappa session.
Yes.
Can you talk about the Frank Zappa? Can you relay a good Zappa story for the audience? And
well, right. The first time I worked for him, he was, to put it mildly, unusual, and but he had a certain something that was unusual. The picture that you saw was taken at the very infamous date on an album called Lumpy Gravy.
Lumpy Gravy.
Yeah, and it was unbelievable. I don't even remember how to describe it, but it just was wild. He was a wild man.
I want to go back to this thing. You talk about Benny Golson doing. You did a lot of TV work for him.
Right.
Can you talk about just today? I mean, you go into a session today, it might take the drummer from my generation 40 minutes just to get the right drum sound. So it's kind of tedious now. But I want you to talk a little bit about how sparse the chord charts were for a lot of these sessions, and how much flexibility and how much autonomy the musician actually had in creating the music. Gene Page used to give Barry White's rhythm section just like.
I worked for Barry White.
Get out of here!
Oh, no.
When did you work? When he was homeless, or when he was
years. I worked with all those people. I did a lot of Motown, and I remember you've heard of John Guerin.
Love him.
Yeah, I don't know if he was on. I think he might have been on it. And Barry was going to demonstrate a drum feel, and he played the backbeat so hard he bent the drum or the rim or something. I can't remember. But
did Guerin lose his mind?
Huh?
Guerin lost his mind. He got upset.
No, I don't think so.
But I mean, what was that? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. Is that the language of jazz, the black language? It wasn't verbal. It never was. And in the studio with Gene Page or any of the
worked with him.
Right. I mean, wasn't it less verbal leadership and more about allowing you guys to just do what you were good at?
Which was less verbal?
Well, I mean, like the idea, just the idea of using, not telling you what to do, giving you very, very sparse arrangements.
Well, that's why the so-called wrecking crew, when we came in, we just innately knew, and sometimes the page would just have bars and nothing on it, or the very most, or the very least, chord symbols, and they would say, well, no, do this, do that. I worked a lot with the Beach Boys, and Phil Spector, all those guys, and we would come up with certain things, and if they didn't like it or they wanted something else, they would tell us. So it was up to the musicianship of all of us to come up with stuff.
So you just used the word there that there would just be you would just have just a very small amount of stuff, and then you could really play. You would play a bunch of tunes. You'd play Feel, and then you'd play it for the Beach Boys, and they'd say, "Yeah, we like that," or "We don't like that."
Right.
That is, I mean, it's just kind of people knowing their roles, you know.
Well, I started as a record day studio musician, and then, quote unquote, I graduated to also include motion picture and TV. And those, you had to be a little more sophisticated, because composers would be real composers, and they would write stuff, and, you know, so...
Lalo Schifrin.
Oh, all those guys. I worked with all those guys.
I mean, what was that transition like?
It was just seamless, because I had, to me, the most versatile musicians are jazz musicians. Nothing taking away from classical or rockers, but we're very sophisticated, and I felt that we could go either way, and which we did.
Can you talk a little bit about how you learned to craft a solo, to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and saying it in a short enough period of time where you just felt like you weren't wanking it?
Again, I just...
Don't say it's genetics. You're not going to get off that easy.
Well, I'm going to use the word innate.
It was innate, but you're telling me from the get-go, you were always able to say what you needed to say in a short period of time?
Well, there was nothing worked out. It just, I heard that way, and I would listen to phenomenal people, and it just happened. I think you're born with that.
Who did you play with at Memory Lane? Was it HB or?
I don't remember. What Memory Lane was that?
It was down in South Central LA. It was a club down there, and
the name sounds familiar, but I don't know if I ever worked there. I worked another club that's now defunct with Chico opposite another god.
The It Club?
Sonny Rollins.
You worked opposite Sonny.
And one of the great moments of my life, we got off the stand after playing, and I went backstage, and Sonny was there, and he only said 2 words. Yeah, man.
Yeah. That was it.
That was it.
Oh man, Budimir. No, what about Thelonious? Did you get to see Monk play?
Who?
Thelonious Monk?
Oh no, I don't think I did.
But you got a chance to see Powell, and you played Birdland with Chico.
Right.
My God, so can you talk about like this? How long the sets were, and I mean,
how long was what?
I mean, you're talking about the most iconic club of all time.
Oh right.
Okay, how late in the night would you play, and what was it like to be within the camaraderie of the Cats? I mean, you were with the Cats.
Phenomenal, and when we were off, we had access to all the great players in New York. You know, I remember we were in Detroit, and Eric told me, "I want us to go hear this guy," and we went to this club, and the alto player sounded like Bird, and guess who that was?
Oh,
Charles McPherson.
He's tuning in right now.
Huh?
Charlie's tuning into this right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Charlie McPherson, for a great, incredible. So that, I mean,
he was fantastic.
You know, a lot of times before Miles had his own band, they'd say he's just the little bird. Sonny Stitt was the next bird.
A story with Sonny Stitt. We're in Philadelphia with Chico. We go over, Eric and I go over to see Sonny. And I don't know if Sonny knew Eric, but he invited Eric to play, and Eric had brought his horn. Sonny Stitt counts off Cherokee. I mean, faster than lightning. Sonny played the melody and pointed to Eric to play. Well, you had to put up or shut up then, and Eric did fine.
He was such a gentle soul, man.
Oh, he was.
Can you just, I mean, to me, Dolphy is such a shaman character. I mean, did you ever record on an album with him?
I don't think so, no. I only worked with him, I think, with Chico.
With Chico. Do you believe that? I mean, I know you were just trying to sing for your supper, and you were on the road with Peggy Lee or Chico.
Right.
But I found this album, a double album the other day. It's a Jazz for Freedom. And it was all the cats, Tatum, Dizzy, Stan Getz. And it seemed to me that the music, the melodic music of that time was social consciousness music. It was movement music. Did you feel like it was something larger than just some sort of chops fest or a facility show or just a place for... I mean, music is made for pacification now, Dennis. It's not the burning... I mean, it's not what you started with. Was the music social consciousness music at one time?
I never gave it a thought. In those days, I was young.
But when they sent the white boy in to get the deli sandwiches, you must have been thinking something. You're on the road with a black band.
I know. It didn't. I don't think it really crossed my mind. It just seems natural.
You did you see a definitive shift in this music scene, in the studio scene here at a certain point? Did it change at any point? I mean, you guys were coming in for so long, and you'd come in before the sun came up, and you'd leave after the sun went down, and then over time, I mean, the industry doesn't support the industry only supports musicians that they know they're going to get money back on. The records you made on Revelation, it was all press, but they weren't concerned about the bottom line. And I'm just wondering, I couldn't ask a better person, when you started to see a change in that brotherhood, because that is part of the issue now. You guys saw each other all the time. There was all this cross-pollination of the music. It was vibrant. And then it kind of dried up. And I'm just wondering when you saw that change.
I just don't think I was thinking about that or aware.
You tell the audience the story about Barbra Streisand when with the Roger Kellaway thing, when he came in.
Where is that now?
That was when Kellaway wrote this huge.
Oh yeah.
This is a great story, and Roger's going to be tuning in later.
We started the scoring. It was Stars Born, wasn't it?
A Star is Born.
And Roger had pulled out everything. He's a phenomenal musician.
Unreal genius.
Yeah. So we did the main title. The main title, for the folks who don't know, is the opening of the movie, and it's a big deal. So it was gorgeous, as usual, to expect from Roger. Barbara comes out and says a few words, "I don't like it." And so Roger had to stay up for hours and hours and redo it. But that was Barbara.
What are you still learning about today? I mean, you don't play out anymore, but you just played Beautiful Ballad to open.
Thank you.
I mean, we're all still learning. What are you learning still about yourself and about music?
Well, I've had some medical issues, arthritis and everything, and I'm really looking back at appreciating the time when I didn't have so much pain. So, but I'm dealing with it, and one day I hope to come back playing.
If you get that opportunity, what kind of band would you like to put together?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know, probably a quartet. One thing I must say about the studios, we had to play every kind of music, a lot of times stuff we didn't like, but it just made me a better musician. And that CD of mine, Soul of Dennis Budimir, proves it, because I'm playing from my heart and soul. And when I was a jazzer, 19 with Chico, it was bebop, baby. That was it. But so I wasn't so into the lyricism as I became when I got older.
How did you put your heart into something that you couldn't get off on musically in the studio? I know you were getting paid good union salary and all that stuff, but like you just said, you played on a lot of records that you didn't like the music, but yet you put your heart and soul into it. How did you?
Well, because that's what we had to do, and you wanted to give the composer and the producers what they were looking for. And I soon came to realize, a funny story about that. I realized that you have to play what they want, not what you, as a jazzer you want to play. I did a rehearsal or something. I forget I think it was Jack Nietzsche. I think there was a writer.
Sure.
Anyway, it was just again like we mentioned before, a chord chart. The music was just a chord chart. So he stopped stopped all one time. He said he didn't know who I was. He said, "Guitar, what are you doing there?" And it was like D minor G7 C. And I played it for him. He says, "Well, you're not playing this." I said, "I am." And jazz musicians would never play C, E, G,
right.
a triad.
Right.
We would load it up with B and G and whatever. And I played it for him. He said, "No, C, C, E, G." And I thought I was going to throw up, but I tried to keep my cool.
I want you to talk to the audience, people that are going to watch this 20 years, 30 years from now. A guy who was influential in so many people's lives. Can you talk about the legacy of Henry Mancini?
Of Henry Mancini? Well, first of all, he was a great musician and a composer and a great human being. I had him come to my house when I first got some synths set up, and I had two setups. I had an electric guitar set up with effects case, two amplifiers to go stereo and a pedal board. Then I had another setup with all my rack with all my synth stuff. I mean, it was unbelievable. And Hank kind of took a fancy to it, and he used it somewhat, and as some other people. But he was just one of the greats, man.
He opened a lot of doors for a lot of people.
Who, Hank?
Yeah, Hank. Yeah, he did a lot. And, I'm just wondering also, going back to this idea of individual sound, Bud Powell and your biggest influences on guitar, how should people, there's so much information out there today, Dennis. Have you written a book on guitar theory yet?
No.
I'm just saying, there was not a saturation of material. You really had to learn stuff auditorily.
Except if I wrote a book, it wouldn't be about guitar. It would be about music. So that's the difference.
Well, explain what you mean by that. That's
because to me, the guitar was just a mechanism for getting out my solos and my feeling for music. Sometimes I wish it was a horn, but it wasn't. So that going back to what we talked about earlier. So it's just a mechanism to get out your music. And I had the advantage of being a chordal. It's a chordal instrument.
Right.
The only other one would be a piano.
You would write a book on music. Do you believe it's all music at the Duke Ellington School? I mean, labels have stratified and kind of choked off vocabulary in music. You got 15 different... You ask somebody what jazz is, you'll get 15 different answers. I just call it music.
Right.
Is that the school you came from? I mean, did Chico Hamilton call the music jazz? Mingus called it Mingus music. I mean, were there labels attached to the music back then?
I didn't pay any attention.
You never. What do you mean you didn't pay attention? You were all over there.
But I was part of it, and it was innate. See, that's the key right there.
So explain the innate inside. What is that? Because I mean, maybe there are people that don't have a lot. They're insecure with themselves, but innate, they have a lot of innate.
Well, some people, they become very good technically, whatever, but they never really get the feeling. Just like when Miles would play one note or two notes and let two bars go by. That's another thing I did on my album. What's good? Some of my best solos are on that album are the notes that I did not play. And I learned that from Miles.
Bless you, man. Yeah, it's not the notes you play; it's the notes you don't play.
Right.
Again, it goes back to breathing. Fred Tackett's tuning in, and he told me a story about this Carnage.
Who was that?
Fred Tackett.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He talked about this Harry Nilsson session. I mean, it was.
Watch my tuner there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I don't want to. Last thing I want to do is hurt Dennis Budimir's tuner.
Just push it over.
I will. Yeah. We don't. How many late nights did you spend in a debaucherous fashion with all the cats, because you would Martoni's. Harry would like to go to Martoni's. All the musicians would drink wine and eat, and then you'd go in the studio till the sun came up.
Right.
But Fred said that everybody else was, they were ingesting drugs and alcohol, and you were there cracking up. He said, you were having a ball. But can you talk about the craziest sessions? I mean, because Terry Gibbs talked about some Phil Ramone sessions that he was on that were pretty insane.
Who did?
Terry Gibbs, the Vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, can you talk about the?
Well, I remember those days that were really crazy, and we would go along. But the studio guys like me sometimes would have a movie call at 8 a.m. at Fox, and I remember working for Tom Jones.
Yes.
And he would go long and late, and finally I just said, man, I gotta go.
I gotta get up in the morning, dude.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, just give some inspiration to people out there who are trying to be themselves. I mean, I think you're the epitome of somebody who's always been themselves, and it's maybe been an innate thing. But can you give some inspiration to the people around the world as we sit here and the fires cook and the world gets warmer? And what are your words of wisdom for the world?
Keep the faith, baby.
Dennis Budimir, Alone Together. Much love to you, man. It was great to hang.
Thank you.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back later.